was all this talk about home. That was all we ever talked about.
I remember being down in an air raid shelter underground and hearing the banging and the noise and knocking and wondering when we get up in the building be still there.
He was only 24 years of age. He was fighting a war in a foreign land on the other side of the world for a country that he knew nothing about.
His going away present from the U.S. Army outside of his citizenship paper was a train ticket home to Fort Sheridan, and he was back at work in a week.
And surprisingly, this guy said, "Well, welcome home." And I think that that was a very nice gesture.
Throughout the 20th century, mankind has witnessed the advent of mechanised warfare. Despite maintaining a state of political neutrality since gaining independence from the British Empire in 1921, Ireland, a small peripheral island on the west coast of Europe, has seen her sons and daughters fight in all this century's major conflicts. From the fields of Flanders to Franco's Spain and the Vietnam conflict, Irish men and women have left home in search of work or adventure and found themselves fighting under the flag of another country. Many have never returned. Those who did spoke little of what they encountered. Over the course of this documentary, we hope to share some of their stories with you.
In the 1930s, you see, Ireland was a disastrous country to live in, and there was no work or anything at all like that, and the men had to go. And there were lots and lots and lots of men, especially from West Cork, that joined the Navy.
Small little place, tucked in the mountains and between the bogs and the River Shannon on one side, and he was from County Limerick. And as I say, from a small farm, no work, nothing happening, had no choice but to bail out.
I was on the travelling idea that once I get into the Air Force, I was going to travel. I was going to see the world, which was the reason that I had gone to America in the first place. So now I was going to join the Air Force and I was going to travel. How I was going to do it, I wasn't quite sure, but I was going to do it.
Things were tough back in the 40s and 50s. And when I got out of school in 1956, there was no work. I mean, there was absolutely nothing.
Like my father used to take me away on weekends up the mountains, Carricktool, Corrantool, all these places, like from a very early age, and what he learnt in, shall we say, in places like Vietnam as a soldier, as an operator, what he learned in the Irish Army, the Irish Rangering, what he brought home, that was instilled into me at a very young age.
I suppose as I got a bit older, the whole Vietnam fad was out there in the mid-80s, to the late 80s, the movies Platoon, Full Metal Jacket and all these kind of movies sort of got me interested in the whole military life and wanting to be a soldier. And I think from that point on, there was only one outcome.
I asked him about, when you got your draft notice, what would you have done? He goes, I didn't really have a lot of choice. He goes, if I came back to Ireland, I get labeled as a coward because everybody would have known my business. He didn't, or he goes, my other choice would have been I would have went back to Ireland and turned around and emigrated either to Canada or Australia to move on to, something bigger and better, so to speak. So he goes, it was the right thing to do. He went and served the country. That wasn't his own.
Con Glanton from West Cork was born into a military family. His father had served with the Royal Navy, and at the age of 15, Con followed in his footsteps. He served as an engineer on the HMS Illustrious during the Second World War. Con retired to West Cork as a lieutenant commander in 1977.
I was 16 and a half when I joined my first ship, and we were meant to go to sea and meant to take the Germans on, meant for the fight, if you like. We were just ordinary 15 or 16-year-old boys. There was a gang of us together, of course, as well. And that was it. We were mad for the road.
Michael Noon left Ireland for America in search of employment in 1956. Rather than wait to be drafted into the army and on advice from a friend, he joined the United States Air Force. In 1972, he volunteered for an overseas assignment to Vietnam, leaving his young family behind.
And if I waited until I was drafted in the army, that's where you'd normally go, you'd be put in infantry. I wasn't really too happy about infantry, but I talked with a lot of my friends that were over there, and they recommended I go in the Air Force. But I took the test for the Air Force, I took a test for the Navy, I took a test for the Marine Corps. I didn't bother about the Army.
Jerry Daimhin immigrated to America in January 1965 for a chance to see the world. For a time, Jerry worked on Wall Street for JP Morgan. In order to further his career with the company, and on advice from a friend, he joined the United States Air Force. He arrived in Vietnam sometime around New Year's Day 1968.
So I decided that I asked this man in particular what service should I go for, and he says the best service to go for was the Air Force, because with the Air Force they would train you. They would train you into a field of something that you'd be qualified, that you would be good at. So that's what I did. I volunteered in for the Air Force.
Having been refused entry into the Irish Army, Padraig O'Keefe from Cove, County Cork joined the French Foreign Legion in 1992. After his service in the Legion, Padraig went on to become a private security consultant, operating in some of the world's most dangerous war zones.
I applied for the Irish Army and I went for an interview which they told me that they thought I didn't have what it takes to be a soldier, so that put an end to that. But I did toy with going to the UK, but again at the time, it was something I thought best avoided. And when I was working up in Cavan, I read a book on the Legion, and with that then I made my decision. That's where I had to go. I left without anybody knowing where I was heading off to, I suppose I kind of knew that if I said it to my parents, or I said it to my friends, I'd be giving people the opportunity to talk me out of it. So I felt while it was still strong in my mind, I just had to go with it. And I kept everyone pretty much in the dark about it.
Daimhin McGregor from Passage West in County Cork was born into a family with a strong military history. His father served in the US military, while his grandfather and great-grandfather were both Legionnaires. After being rejected by the Irish Army, Daimhin's next step was to join the French Foreign Legion in 1988.
And basically he dropped me off about 50 metres from the gate. The gate is like a huge citadel, it's a big old fort, and you see this guy in front of the gate and basically tell you the parade, which is full dress uniform. Kept me the whole lot, and I saw him. This is what I want anyway.
I think the mindset was, this is it. The rejection obviously from the Irish Army kind of hurt a bit, but in a way it was a blessing because it left open the space to go to France in the end. I remember getting into the train station in Marseille, and there was 2 Legionnaires in uniform, and I thought, that's it, that's a couple of months and that'll do it, and that will see me through. So got a taxi to Auban, which is the 1st Regiment Étranger, which are based in Auban, and the taxi driver dropped me about 100 metres down from the gate. He said it won't look too good if you rock up in a taxi, so he said it's better you walk up and you do your thing yourself. So with that, walked up to the gate. The guys on guard duty, there's a constant influx of people in and out, so they're well used to dealing with this. So I just said, listen, in English, I'm here to join the Legion, so that was it. Gate open, and you're in.
Dennis O'Brien is the nephew of Patrick McHenry, who served in the US Army. Patrick was drafted in 1951. Sadly, he was killed just 16 days after arriving in Korea. His involvement with the army is completely unknown to his family back home in Ireland until they received the news of his death.
And they got a choice. They got 2 choices actually. They got one choice: you join the army, You go and you do your stint in the war, or else you took the boat and you came home. And well, he had known that there wasn't a whole pile at home for him, so he joined the army, and that was a bit of basic training in America before they went, and then they went to Japan. They got only a couple of weeks training in Japan, and after that then they went to the war zone. They went to Korea, and he was only 16 days in Korea when he was killed in action.
So we packed up, and all my household goods were put in storage, and I moved the family back to Boyle. Now I headed off to Vietnam, and when this very, very sad event is saying goodbye to them at Shannon Airport. And I headed over to Boston and then headed straight to San Francisco, and where you did a little bit of extra training on Vietnam and what to expect over there.
During the chaos of war, lines of communication are difficult to maintain. This was especially true in the early 20th century, when people relied on mail routes. More often than not, letters did not arrive, and if they did, the news they bore could be weeks old.
My mother wrote to me, despite the fact that she had all the other children to look after, every Sunday night. Every Sunday night. Well, your letters were censored, and they very often took 4 or 5 weeks to get home by ship. The airmail came in later on in the war, but early on in the war, the letters took a long time. And very often they didn't get there at all because the ship carrying was sunk or something. And you had no continuity.
When he sent a letter from America, it took 6 weeks to come. So any news that they got, by the time they got it, it was old news. It was 6 weeks old. You know, so that's how they really never knew that he wasn't in Chicago.
So for virtually 3 months, I wrote to them on a weekly basis home. So presumably they got my letters. I never mentioned Vietnam at that point in time. But I received no mail from them from December until the following April, because all the mail had been mixed up here and there, and nothing came at all. So I actually had no idea. So I had to make up stories to them for the first 3 months while they were, and that was right through Tet, which was a very violent period of time. So when I got their mail eventually, I didn't get all. I got this big heap of stuff, old mail. It landed in one day, maybe 100 letters or something like that. And I sorted through them and I read through them and all of that. But most of the recurring thing was, where are you now? What base are you on?
I made it a point to write home every day, and I number the letters 1 on up. Trouble was that it would take 2 weeks for the letter to arrive home. And we also communicated by audio tape. I'd send her one, and she'd send us maybe the same one back, re-recorded, and I still got some of them around somewhere.
Despite recent advances in technology, some soldiers cannot contact home when they're operational. Others avoid too much contact with their families because of their commitments to the service and their fellow team members.
When I joined, I kept my own name, so I didn't have any problems. I had no restrictions in ringing home, sending or receiving mail, whereas other guys, if the Legion felt that they needed an identity change, or they themselves felt they needed an identity change, well, you know, that's what you get. You get an identity change, and there is absolutely no contact whatsoever with your friends and family. So, you know, when they asked me at my interview, did I feel that I needed to change my name, I thought, no, I'm quite happy to be here as Portugal. We keep it at that. You know, so I was able to maintain contact, not a whole lot, but you know, with something, I suppose, a lifeline for the family, you know, to have anyway. So
When I was operational, never. No, I would never write home, because at that stage I found you'd get a letter home or whatever and you'd just be too upset. And you can't do that because you're in a team with other guys and they're relying on you and you're relying on them, and it's that simple. You know, if you're distracted for any length of time, people die. And that's the reality of the situation, so no. So, like, you have your game face on, you have to go in, you have 50, 60 different things going through your mind at any one moment, all on a tactical or strategic level or whatever level you want to fucking call it. So basically, thinking about home will get you killed. It's that simple, you know.
Despite differences in the nature and reasons for war, all soldiers would agree that war is hell. The emotional and physical effects of combat are never forgotten. During his time aboard the HMS Illustrious, Con Glanton experienced a large amount of enemy contact. One particular experience against the Germans will forever stand out in his mind.
In January 1941, just 3 months afterwards, and they hammered us, good and proper. The Illustrious was hit with 6,000-pound bombs, and it's on the record that she's the only ship that survived that bombing. It's 6 bombs that normally sink a ship, but she survived it anyway. And we lost 159 men killed and 128 injured.
War is hell. It's not any soldier that says that he likes what's happening in war, he's lying. Because he's the one that has to live through it.
Mike Noon might say to me, oh, I don't wear medals, I don't wear anything from the war period. I can tell the stories of it, all right, tell the stories of it. But there was nothing. There was nothing. There was no heroism. There was nothing to be proud of. You know, you're not fighting for glory. You're not fighting for. There was no Vietnamese person that could turn around and say, "Great job there. Great job. Thank you very much for doing it." No one would do that. They didn't want us there. They didn't want us there. The people that I knew in the villages, we never talked about it. But the fact that the amazing part, and it would show the type of people they are, that they're now open to the world, you see, and everybody can go there and everybody is welcome there. They should really not have anybody there. They should tell everybody, F off. Look what she did to us, because nobody backed them up when it was going on.
I mean, Boise was an eye-opener. I mean, it was a war zone, you know, nothing like Cambodia, you know, 2 tours completely opposite ends of the scale. It was, to say, you could kind of feel that evil undercurrent. It was like, you know, it had been forsaken by God as such, you know, it was just this like a horrible place, you know, where people endured horrible things, and it was something you saw every day. And it kind of goes back to then reinforcing how you deal with the things you saw. You know, you seal it, bang, you put it away, you don't think about it, and you become emotionless as such, to a point that it can get to a stage where you're going, you know, can I ignore how I know what I've seen, but yet it's not having any effect on me emotionally, so you know then obviously there's things going wrong somewhere.
All war is horrific. Any guy that tells you he's been in the clear war is either hasn't been there or is a liar. Do you know what I mean? Or a fantasist. But some wars are that bit dirtier than other wars, shall we say. And Bosnia, you had Serb snipers that were targeting women and children. Do you know what I mean? Women and children were going out to the Neretva river trying to get water because they turned off the water first day. And basically what they do is that they would hit the child somewhere where you get maybe a flesh wound or break an arm. They'd start screaming and roaring. Their father comes in, he gets a headshot or a body shot. Their mother would come in. Do you know what I mean? So that's what you were that's what you were fighting against. You know, when you come home, these are the experiences that you have. And they're not the mainstream experiences.
Jim Reardon was drafted into the US Army during the Korean conflict. Rather than return home to Ireland, he finished his service and was rewarded with US citizenship. Jim still lives in Chicago, Illinois. We spoke to Jim's son John about his father's time in the service.
I just couldn't picture my dad as a 21-year-old dropping mortars dropping mortars and firing them as fast as they could. He said they used to fire them so hot and so heavy at one time, they'd have to cool off the tube because that's how bad they were going. You tell me there's not a cure for cancer, a cure for AIDS, in that stack of names that are dead for nothing. So between those two wars, you're 12,000 people dead. Yeah, so that's, war is war, like I said, and it's in this day and age, you shouldn't have to get to that point.
Coming home on leave can provide a soldier with a welcome reprieve from the strain of combat. While they may be rested physically, the prospect of having to return can cause emotional anguish for them and their families.
I was arrived at JFK and went through immigration, and in my passport that I presented, I had a copy of my orders, and he said, "You're coming back from Vietnam?" I said, "Yeah." And surprisingly, this guy said, "Well, welcome home." And I think that that was a very nice gesture.
The second time I was at home, we were sitting at the table and I says, I have to go back this week. Maybe whatever date it was. I already had a reservation made back. And my mother says, "And are you going to New York?" And I said, "No, I'm going back to Vietnam." And she started crying. And I said, "I'm okay, I was all right. I was sound, I was, what can you say?" I said, but that was the first time that it probably hit me that I should have been more, but I was having such a life of my own that I didn't think of that I was really causing that trouble to others, especially to my family. Because when I was over there, I was doing a job. I was working I was in the community. I had a girl. I had great freedom, and I suppose never again in my lifetime had I such a time as I had in times. Even though you had the war running alongside you, and you had all the trauma and the emotions of it and like that, but apart from that part, that was daily there, but it didn't seem to overtake the other part. The other part was like I had some very fine friends and Vietnamese friends.
Despite the horrific circumstances that have brought them together during times of war, soldiers often develop relationships with members of the local community. These relationships can provide soldiers with long-lasting fond memories of the countries they served in.
And I think out of all the countries I served in, both in the military and privately, I think the only country that I actually go back to visit would be Cambodia, because they were just fantastic people for what they endured, so. And like one of the places we were camping was next to a Buddhist temple with a wee little village around it, so we had constantly, the local women were doing the laundry and stuff like that, so we had massive interaction with the local population, and they're fantastically friendly people as well, so it's hard not to get involved in their lives.
If you went to places, especially South Africa, ordinary families would take in 2 or 3 sailors, take them home for tea or something like that, and you get to know them and make friends with them, and some stayed friends all the war. And they would write home to your mother and tell them that Con was here last week because the ship was, or the miniature ship is actually, and they're the way of doing it, you know.
I went down at least once a week, maybe twice a week, to the orphanage, and through the orphans then I went down to the village, and the village was a hamlet, they called it a hamlet, where all the houses were around in a circle and the farmland was outside that again. And then everybody worked on the farms and together. But this one night we went to a concert, a concert in a hall, in the village hall. And the concert would be like a concert that we would have. There was singing and dancing and that kind of stuff in beautiful, very all local stuff. And I was the only stranger, only Westerner in this company. Could have been several hundred people at the concert. And then there was a raffle. And I won the first prize. That was impossible. It had to be fixed. It had to be fixed. There was no way that I was the only person in the hall, be the only stranger in the hall, and they were so excited that I had won the first. I figured it had to be fixed up, and I received this beautiful painting and things like that, local painting that somebody had drawn and beautiful. And the way that you were treated, you know, I would say that they went out of their way. They may have, you know, out of the way to look after you.
Leaving the military can be an emotionally strenuous time for soldiers. The prospect of finding work and reintegrating themselves back into civilian life poses new challenges for them and their families. Sadly, not everyone returns home.
I think it was around the 15th of December in 1951. It came to her, telling her that the uncle her brother had been killed, and she had to go up the road, which was a mile up the road, into her mother and the rest of the family, and break that news to them. You can imagine the shock that was in the area. Like at that time, he was only 24. He was very, very popular before he went. And the next thing was everybody, it was coming up to Christmas, and everybody had heard this rumour that this fella had been killed. Like, it was the talk of the place really at the time, you know. I mean, the first thing that was on, where in the name of God is Korea, like, you know. As one fella up the road said, Jesus, he said, to awful far away, wherever it is.
They stopped at every little country in South America dropping troops off, and he got into New York then. His going away present from the U.S. Army outside of his citizenship paper was a train ticket home to Fort Sheridan, and you know, he was back at work in a week.
It was difficult to get up in the morning and then find you had nothing to do. You had no work, you know, and we had your pension, of course, you could live all right. And when I came home then, we built this place. We moved in here about the 1st of August 78, and we're here since.
My wife and my brother picked me up at Dublin Airport, and it was October, and it was getting dark by the time we crossed over the Shannon at Drumsna, which is on the way here. And at that time, the bridge at Drumsna was being repaired, and they had boards across the Shannon, across the bridge. And I was asleep on the back seat on my wife's lap. And we crossed this bridge, and you heard this tunk, 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 tunk. And eventually my wife said to me, she says, "Mike, what are you doing down there?" And what I was actually trying to do was crawl underneath the seat of the car. And loud noises for several months after that, you know, you would wake up. And if anything happened afterwards, you'd be rolling out of the bed, trying to get underneath the bed.
Only 26 when I came home. You're still invincible as such, you know, and you come to the stage where you've built up again that persona around you, where you know, you can't get close to people, you can't talk to anyone about what you've seen or what you've done. And the more time goes by, the harder it becomes, you know, to be able to release all that. For me, there wasn't any readjustment as such. It was always over here, and everyone else was kind of over there. Again, you know, our escape, or my escape, was alcohol. You know, still all the time, you just try and forget it. You're trying to drink your troubles away as such.
I was more scared when I came home and said, right, I'm not going to do this now anymore, per se, than I would have been if I was in a 360, 10 metre contact. Because I knew what to do in a 3 metre, 10 metre contact, or 360, do you know what I mean? I knew what to do. I knew what my role was. I was an LMG gunner, I was supposed to suppress him. End of story. That was what my job was. But then when you come home here and you're like, and you're dealing with personalities, and you're dealing with people, and you're dealing with people's moods, and this, that, and the other thing. When you're over there, you're all focused, and you know what needs to be done. And the trivial stuff doesn't come into it, because it's not trivial stuff. It's life or death stuff. I could be out the back cutting the grass, and a helicopter will pass over. I can get a shiver down my spine, right? But that doesn't happen normally. That's, you know, that's not a regular thing. I used to kind of get flashbacks when I came back first. I haven't had flashbacks in years. I don't really. That doesn't come into it as such, you know. When you have your memories, they're a different thing. Do you know what I mean? It's not like the movies or the fucking Americanization and thing of it, where it's all, oh, you're walking down the street next minute, you're like this. You're not. But it's just there. It's kind of, it's vaguely there, shall we say.
When I come back home, then I had a year then out doing nothing. That's when I travelled all over Ireland then. I bought a car, travelled all over the country. And then one day I was someplace or other, and I said, I have to stop. And yeah, I suppose that father and mother must have been praying so much. I had to stop, and I came back home, and I said to my brother had this place here, and he was living in Dublin, but my father and mother was living here by themselves. Called into my brother, and I says, I'll buy the farm from you. And he says, what are you going to do with it? I said, I'm going to go farming. But he says, you don't know anything about it. I said, that's true, but I'm still going to do it. So we made a deal there and then, and I had the money, and I paid him in cash, and I went back home and I said to my father and mother, I said, I'm the new owner of the farm. And I could see they were from that on, and that was it. That was the turning point then.
You know, no, it's just easier for me because, as I said, there's kids, the wife, I have a civilian job. I'm dealing with, shall we say, civilians all the time. I will never be a civilian, never. I will always think with the mentality that I had for being out there, always. But I can kind of cut back in that and put that into its box there, and then we can bring out this other part of me, and that can deal with, shall we say, everything.
I met someone, and I said for the first time in over 22 odd years, I actually got involved in a relationship, and I think with her, I think she kind of brought the whole thing out of me, where, you know, it's okay to be loved, it's okay to love, it's okay to, you know, to be honest with your emotions as such, you know. So she started to bring me out of my shell emotionally. And when I deployed to Africa late last year, when I got over, then it was only then that I realised, you know, this is not where I want to be, this is not what I want to be doing. I had a shot of happiness at home, which I've never had for so long, because it's something you deny yourself. And you know, to realise when you're out there that, fuck it, you know, it's done. And I think when I came back from Africa, I said to myself, no, that's, you know, I'm finished as far as, you know, it's time for me to heal now and to reconnect with myself and reconnect with my family as well, you know.